Here knows those two factors, and the question is how much weight to attach to one or the other factor. Let me begin with just a brief background story. At some point, as some of you may know, Professor Chomsky, he met at some length with Syed Nasrallah, the late head of Hezbollah, the Party of God. And it was very striking. How many people here, just out of curiosity, followed Syed Nasrallah's speeches? So raise your hand. Not so many. What was very striking when you listened to his speeches was that he was very clearly persuaded by Professor Chomsky's own understanding of the conflict. Namely, Nasrallah would always say that Israel is just a tool of the United States, that it was the U.S.'s agent in the Arab Muslim world, and that what's really going on in the Middle East is not Zionist power or Jewish power. What's really going on is the United States and Britain and France trying to retain control of the Middle East. And I think it would be silly to dismiss that factor. It's clearly a large factor in shaping US, British, French, and German policy in the Middle East. And I believe, and here I disagreed with Professor Chomsky on one of those rare occasions, which he was kind enough not to question me on, but just to acknowledge that we disagreed. There is the factor of a Jewish lobby, Jewish power, which exerts itself and affects policy. Now, the question, of course, is how much weight to attach to each factor. I think it depends on the situation. I think what happened, for example, with the encampments in my country in the spring and then the summer, that was Jewish power. Non-Jews didn't give a darn, There was one non-Jew who used money as a club against the boards of trustees of these various universities, but in general, it's not only that you can name them because they were very upfront about it, they boasted about it. It was Bill Ackman at Harvard, it was Robert Kraft at Columbia, it was Barry Sternlicht at Brown University. They boasted about the fact that they gave ultimatums to the boards of trustees of these universities: crush these encampments or you're not getting our money. So there, I think, it's clear that this was an exercise of a group of people who have a large amount of financial power, and what comes with financial power, political power. But would that account for example, the US's reaction after October 7th? I think there is the factor of, President Biden, for example. He has 3 daughters. They're all married to Jewish men. He claims to be a Zionist. And I think his lack of mental lucidity was such that he was not able to think through his loyalties at this point in his life and was reacting in a, let's call it, semi-senile way. But I don't think that was the main factor. The main factor was that after October 7th, a lot of people, I'm sure many people in this room, when they saw this ragtag army in Gaza, it proved itself to be much more competent than anybody imagined. And simultaneously, Israel, its famed intelligence capacity, its famed technical capacity. Remember, Gaza is the size of a postage stamp, and every square inch of it was being monitored by Israeli intelligence. Intelligence from the air, and also, for those of you from Gaza, human intelligence. They had a vast network of collaborators and spies in Gaza. And notwithstanding, October 7th proved to be a disaster for Israel. So then it starts going through the minds of people of, hey, maybe Israel isn't militarily invincible. Maybe there is a military option against Israel. And for Israel and the West, that was a disaster. It's what Israel calls its deterrence capability. And its deterrence capability means something very simple. Restoring the Arab world's fear of Israel. Restoring the Arab world's fear of Israel. The U.S. had invested a lot in Israel's deterrence capacity because it played a major role in keeping the Arab Muslim world in line. So if they went along unconditionally with the horrors that were inflicted on Gaza and then on Lebanon, it's because, aside from any personal stake Mr. Biden had in Israel, there was a clear political goal to restore the Arab world's fear, dread of Israel. And the way Israel has done that, there was a period when Israel preserved its deterrence capability by its fighting prowess on the battlefield. That was true in 1967. That was true in 1948. But Israel progressively became a very westernized, secularized, even as there's a large number of religious zealots in Israel, still the essence remained secular. And what is the essence? The essence is very simple, in my opinion. I'm sure there are professors who will say what I'm saying is complete nonsense, fine. When you become a secularized, westernized society, the primary characteristic is you no longer want to die for a cause. You don't want to die for a cause. If you have a choice between dying in a ditch and dancing in a disco, you're going to choose the second. And at that point, Israel ceased to be a fighting force. Israel ceased to be a combat force. Israel became a high-tech murder machine, but the most important thing is by remote control. Your lives aren't at risk. And at that point, how did Israel restore its deterrence capacity? It was no longer by its fighting prowess on the battlefield. The way it restored its deterrence capacity was very straightforward. They inflict such massive death and destruction on the civilian population that they can then transmit to the Arab world the message: if you harbor that silly notion that you have a military option against us, look at Gaza, or what's left of it.
That's true.
That's how they restored their deterrence capacity. The U.S. was totally supportive of Israel's need to restore its deterrence capacity. And therefore, out of very clear political self-interest, I don't think it had virtually anything to do with Jewish power. When Anthony Blinken was going back and forth to the Middle East, he wasn't doing it in the service of Israel. He was serving the U.S. national state. A powerful Israel keeps the Arabs and Muslims in line, and so we will support everything and anything Israel needs to do to restore its deterrence capability, the Arab world's fear of it, and it does that by wreaking massive death and destruction, not on the army, not on combatants, not on what are called military objects, but by pounding away at the civilians and civilian objects. In my opinion, it would take time to discuss, and I don't think we have the time. In my opinion, there has been no war in Gaza. It has not happened. It's just not true. The official Israeli numbers, and here I think the numbers are accurate, less than one Israeli soldier has been killed each day since October 7th. Less than one per day. Now you ask yourself a question. If less than one Israeli is killed a day, does that sound like a war? Now, ask yourself a question. Most people in this room follow events in Gaza with a certain amount of conscientiousness. It's been 14 months. Can anyone in this room name one battle that was fought in Gaza? A battle. One battle that has been fought in Gaza. There haven't been any battles. It's just not true. I'm not faulting the people of Gaza. I'm not faulting Hamas. Would you expect there to be resistance after the United States dropped an atomic bomb in Hiroshima? How could you resist that? Would you expect resistance after the United States dropped the atomic bomb in Nagasaki? How can you resist that? Israel has dropped at least the equivalent of 2 atomic bombs in Gaza, the size of a postage stamp. It never even gets near the Gaza militants. Before it goes anywhere, it completely obliterates and pulverizes the area. You can't resist in that situation. So to even depict it as a war is, in my opinion, to play into the Israeli hands. There's no war in Gaza. There's a genocide in Gaza. The target of Israel's bombing, artillery, and everything else, they're not targeting Hamas. They themselves say, we don't know where the tunnels are. They admit it. So how could you be targeting Hamas if you don't know where it is? They haven't a clue where these tunnels are. I think the amount of tunnels has been vastly exaggerated. I can get into that if you ask me. But it's not being directed. It's not being directed against a military. The whole purpose is to restore its deterrence capacity by the massive death and destruction on the civilian population. And that's a common interest of the U.S. and of Israel.